Yo guys, Tuxico Cereal, and welcome back to another Brawl Stars video. Today we're doing another video similar to the most recent Brawl Stars video I did, which was basically I ranked every Brawl Stars brawler based on if they had infinite supers. Now, we're doing something very similar, and we're going to be ranking every single brawler based on if they had unlimited ammo. Now, there's obviously a modifier that everybody knows called Quickfire. Basically, every time you hit a projectile, you gain a little bit of your ammo back. But that is not what this is. This is you have unlimited ammo. Like, there is no such thing as an ammo bar. You can spam out as many shots as you want, non-stop, and pretty much just cause havoc. Like, there's no reload. So, basically, brawlers with insane burst damage are going to thrive, and brawlers with slow burst damage are going to suck, and brawlers with already a very fast reload speed are probably going to be bad, and brawlers with a very slow reload speed are going to be hella broken. So, we're going to be ranking all 84 brawlers in the game, starting with Shelly, going all the way to Kenji. And without further ado, let's just get into it, starting off with Shelly. So, basically, Shelly has a medium range. She has a decent amount of hit points, but the biggest thing for this is going to be your burst potential, and Shelly barely doesn't have that big of a delay between her attacks. And since her attack is so wide, she's going to be able to get constant chip damage out. Now, the only way you're going to be able to deal insane damage is if you get up close and personal. Now, obviously, super is still a thing, so you can, against tanks, Shelly is literally going to destroy them because she can instantly charge super and just continuously cycle through that super with her main attack spam. The biggest problem, though, is that, again, she lacks the range because the sharpshooters are definitely what's going to thrive here. You have to get in the range first. So I think that's the only downfall. Otherwise, this is easily a B tier for me. Could be even A tier. Next up, we've got Nita. And Nita has another quick burst. But the only problem with Nita is she struggles the same reason as Shelly. She lacks the range. Now, she's going to be able to spam out supers like crazy. The biggest problem is since everybody has infinite ammo, Bruce is just going to insta-die. There's no point in using spawners to waste ammo. So, and she doesn't deal that much damage as is, so I think Nita's going to struggle here. She also has a very fast reload speed as is, so I don't think it's completely the worst, but she's not going to be very great. Next up, we've got Colt. And Colt does have a decent reload speed now, but he also has insane burst damage. He can constantly be spamming out of shots and dealing insane damage. So, Colt's going to be getting a lot of value. Now, the only problem with it is Colt's shots are pretty hard to hit, but it doesn't matter because eventually you're going to connect onto those hits and pretty much shred the opponent into pieces. So, for me, I don't think it's completely game-breaking, but it's definitely going to be in the A tier for me. Next up, we've got Bull. And Bull is a tank. He doesn't have an insanely quick reload speed. He has a pretty mediocre super, but he does have really good burst damage. Just the biggest problem is, like Shelly, he's going to struggle to get in range. His range is shorter than Shelly's. The good thing is he does have the tank trait, so eventually he'll get a super and be able to make plays. It's just that I find it hard for Bull to get a lot of value. So, because once he runs out of the Stomper gadgets, it's going to be a little bit hard. So, for me, it's C tier. I don't think he's that great. Next up, we've got Brock, and Brock is really close between S tier because Brock can spam out shots very quickly. He has a very slow reload speed, and also he can cover so much map control with his incendiary, basically, because every time he shoots his attack, he leaves the fire trail. Now, his shots can be hard to hit in the mid-range, but it doesn't matter because once you approach Brock or get close to him with a tank, you're gonna get killed because of how fast he can spam his shots. So I honestly think Brock could be in the S tier, but there's some that I'm definitely skeptical. So I'm going to put Brock in the A tier, and I'm not going to put it in any order. So next up, you've got Primo, and Primo has no range, a good super, but he doesn't need it because he already has a very fast reload speed as is. He's a tank that can just spam out attacks. So for me, I think Primo has to be in the F tier because he's not going to benefit really at all. He does have the tank trait, but it just isn't going to work because Primo already has a very fast reload speed, so really nothing will change. Next up, we've got Barley, and throwers are going to be so dumb broken with this because the thing about throwers is they're vulnerable once they run out of ammo. Barley will have infinite map control. Now, he can still struggle against aggression, but with the slow gadget and just his constant ability to just spam out shots right there, it's going to be very hard to kill him if you don't have anything that can avoid his attacks. Because even if you are an aggressive brawler, you're still going to be able to catch him. He's still going to catch you and still going to hit you and almost kill you by the time you get in range of him because of all the map control he has. So for me, I have to put Barley in the S tier. Thrower is going to be so freaking broken in this. Next up, we've got Poco. And Poco kind of suffers the same problem, is he lacks the range. However, his attack is so wide, and if he could constantly spam out his attacks and keep cycling through his super, he's going to be so challenging to kill. So for me, I have to put Poco at least in the A tier because his attack is so wide and he can constantly cycle through those supers. Next up, we've got Rosa, and Rosa kind of suffers the same problem as El Primo, and she is a tank with a very fast reload speed, and pretty much you just have to get in range. Now on bushy maps, Rosa I think has a tad bit slower reload speed than El Primo, but either way, it's not going to change Rosa at all, so it's going to be F tier for me. Next up, we've got Jessie, and Jessie is an interesting one because Jessie can spam out attacks pretty quickly and constantly cycle through supers with the bubble. The problem is kind of similar to Nita, is that her turn's going to die pretty quickly, but the big thing about Jessie is she does deal a little more damage, but she also has more range than Nita. So I think that'll help her out a little bit. And I think for me, I'll give her C tier. Next up, we've got Dynamite, and Dynamite is a thrower. The biggest problem with Dynamite with his spamming attacks is he will have a lot of map control and so many supers, but it is challenging to hit his attacks because even if you throw him directly at you, the enemy can just dodge it because it's not extremely challenging to dodge Dynamite's attacks. But either way, though, it's still just so much map control and so much area that it's going to be very hard to approach Dynamite. I don't think it's completely broken like Barley in the next Brawler, but still A tier. Now we have Tick, and everybody knows Tick has one of the slowest reload speeds in the game. But the fact that he can spam his attacks and cover the whole freaking map, basically, you're not going to be able to catch him. He's going to infinitely spam out super. So there's no other choice. Tick has to be an S tier because there's going to be mines all over the map. The only way you can kill Tick is with Mortis or Miko. There's just no way you're going to be able to kill Tick. His map control is going to be absurd. Next up, we've got 8-Bit, and 8-Bit is very similar to a brawler like Colt, where he doesn't have that crazy of a reload speed, but he has insane range and will eventually hit your shots. And he's going to have a lot of supers, even better for cheesy strategies. I don't think it's completely game-breaking like the S tier, but it's going to be in the A tier just like Colt. Next up, we've got Rico, and this might be a shocker to some of you, but Rico already has a very fast reload speed, so I don't think it's going to make the biggest of difference, but either way, he's still going to have so much control because his shots will bounce, and then he's going to cycle through supers and delete you. So I'm going to put Rico in the A tier as well because, like I said, he's similar to Colt as well. It's just his attacks bounce. And obviously 8-Bit, they're all pretty similar. So I think they're all going to be very strong, but not completely broken. Next up, we've got Daryl. And Daryl is a tank that has to get in range. And even with the rework, I don't really think Daryl is going to benefit from this too much. Because the goal with Daryl and how you can really play him is you'll roll into an enemy, just use a couple of attacks, and then roll back out. Or if you mess up, or you get the double combo, eventually you're going to be good. I could only see this being a downside in Heist, but either way, I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. It will be nice, but I don't think it's going to be a huge difference. So I'm going to put him in the C tier. Next up, we've got Penny. And Penny is similar to a brawler like Jessie, where she can spam her attack and deal area control, but she doesn't have a crazy amount of damage, and also her turret can easily get taken out. However, if you put it in a good choke point, it can be hard to approach that turret. So for me, I think it's going to be pretty much as similar as Jessie. So I'm going to put it in C tier. Next up, we've got Carl. And Carl is interesting, because Carl only has one ammo bar, but I don't think you could, because this is what I'm trying to think. If you had unlimited ammo, you could constantly spam out several pickaxes, but it's just not possible, because the way Carl's attack works is he throws his pickaxe, it comes back to him, that's his ammo. Like, you can't spam infinite pickaxes. It just doesn't work like that. So if it was, it would obviously be game breaking. So, but Carl only has one pickaxe, and you can't spam multiple pickaxes. Now there was a bug with it, but it just doesn't work. So it's F tier, logically F tier. Next up, we've got Jackie, and Jackie is another tank that lacks the range. However, Jackie's reload speed is a little bit slower than most of the tanks. The biggest problem, though, is she can't get in range. But just because her reload speed is actually a lot slower than other tanks, so she can at least burst down enemies pretty quickly because she has insane burst damage. So I just think the range is the biggest problem. So I'm going to put her in the D tier. Next up, we've got Gus. And Gus is got a normal reload speed, I'm pretty sure. He doesn't have insane burst damage, but he has the range. So I think that helps him, and he'll be able to get a lot more spirits on the ground. And maybe he can use it to heal up, but he can also use it for the cookie popper gadget. So I think Gus is kind of an underrated one. I don't think it's completely good for the sharpshooter, but long range brawlers with slower reload speeds will definitely benefit the most from this. So B tier for me. Next up, we've got Bo. And Bo has about a normal reload speed. He has the reload gear as well, but he also has a little bit of a faster reload speed than normal. I think it's pretty close between normal and fast, his reload speed. And Bo does deal some decent damage, and he can get supers on the ground more often. But like I said, Bo doesn't have insane range, but his shots aren't that challenging to hit, so it would make a bit of a difference. Don't think it's anything game-breaking, so I'm putting him in the B tier. Next up, we've got Ems. And Ems has some insane burst damage. Like, she can burst her attacks so quickly, and tanks are screwed. Like, you will never be able to approach Ems with infinite ammo. It's just impossible. However, like I've said so many times already, she doesn't have the range. She's a tank counter, but not a long-range counter. So getting in range is going to be the problem. But I just think on specific maps, it's going to be absolutely game-breaking because you will never be able to approach Ems. Ems will out DPS you, especially with the bad Karma star power. She's just going to indefinitely just delete you. And then she'll get you in the slow and make it delete you anymore. So I could easily see this one being A tier. So I'm going to put it in the A tier. Next up, we've got Stu. And Stu has a normal reload speed. Doesn't have that insane of range, but Stu does lack damage. And if he can have infinite ammo, his shots are pretty easy to hit. And good Stu players can constantly use the super to go back and forth, etc., etc. So I think Stu is going to be pretty good. I don't think it's going to be completely broken, but I think B tiers are pretty good. Next up, we've got Piper, and Piper has a very slow reload speed. Imagine with ambush, because you won't need snappy sniping if you have infinite ammo. You're never going to be able to really do much. Piper is going to outrange you, keep hitting you, doing 3.4k with the ambush star power, dealing 4-point-something k. But it's going to be super hard to approach Piper. She has also got the auto-aimer gadget, which will help her even more, because she can just burst down her tanks, which usually counter her, but they don't when you have that star power. She's going to have supers to constantly get away. She's going to have hypercharge almost all the time. And if you're playing bounty or knockout, homemade recipe, just spam. I have to put it S tier, because Piper has one of the slowest reload speeds in the game. She's going to burst down legitimately everybody. She's going to be pretty much impossible to kill. Next up, we've got Pam. And Pam already has a very fast reload speed. So honestly, I don't think much is going to change. I think the only difference with Pam, though, really, is she does have range. But she's too inconsistent. So for me, I don't think it's completely F tier, but it's definitely going to be in the D tier. Next up, we've got Frank. And Frank is an interesting one because Frank, when he's low HP, can constantly spam out those attacks. Like, when he's really low. Man, he can really quickly spam out his attacks and then wait for his reload speed to set more. And he also has range. So, I don't think it's completely useless like the F tier brawlers, but Frank's a tank. And he already has a very fast reload speed. So, it's not going to make that much of a difference. Next up, we got BB. And BB also kind of has the same issue as Frank, pretty much, as she has a wind-up with her attack. At least she can move with it. She already has a very fast reload speed as is. And it's not going to change much, honestly. I think she also has worse range. She can't charge her super. She's just going to die. I'm sorry. I have to put it F tier. BB's not really going to change. Next up, we've got B. And B has a very fast reload speed with 1 ammo. However, what nobody knows about is she actually can burst damage insanely fast. If you haven't known, on big game, B has insane burst damage. She can constantly throw out attacks nonstop. I don't know if there's really any delay with her attack. So, and since she has long range, there's no delay between attacks. So she can constantly spam. Now, it can be a little bit hard because she doesn't have the fastest projectile speed, but eventually you're going to get overwhelmed by a B. If you're a tank, you're never going to touch her. But if you're a long-range brawler, you have to kill her before she bursts you down. So, honestly, I think this is absolutely game-breaking. I'm putting it S tier. I don't care. She has insane burst damage. Next up, we've got Nani, my favorite brawler. And Nani does have a decent reload speed for a sharpshooter. The biggest problem, though, is Nani's burst damage sucks. She has a pretty significant delay between her attacks. Now, she's going to pretty much counter all the sharpshooters and stuff. But the biggest problem for me is she could still get overwhelmed a little bit by assassins because her shots are so challenging to hit. But sharpshooters benefit, so I'm putting Nani in the A tier. Next up, we've got Edgar. And Edgar is really not going to change because Edgar has the fastest reload speed in the game besides Amber. The thing is, though, Edgar literally has a hypercharge that pretty much gives him infinite ammo. So if anything, Edgar's not changing whatsoever. So F tier. Next up, we've got Griff. And Griff has a decent reload speed, but tanks with the keep the change star power, Griff can constantly spam. Griff is so underrated in the quickfire because he has so many projectiles. Just imagine the amount of spam. The biggest problem, though, again, is he lacks the range. Griff's range isn't that great, but at least he has a super that can help him a little bit. He just needs the right map. But on a very open map, Griff ain't doing anything. So I'll bring him down a little bit, though. I still think in comparison to a brawler like Ems, he has insane burst. So I'm going to also put Griff in the A tier. Next up, we got Grom, another thrower. Similar to Dynamite in a way, where his shots are pretty predictable and pretty easy to dodge. However, Grom does have a pretty slow reload speed, and eventually you're going to overwhelm the enemy. But I don't think it's like broken like Barley and Tick, because Grom has an arch, where his attacks are constant, while Barley can throw his stuff directly at the ground. So can Dynamite, but there's a delay, and Tick obviously has the map control. Grom really can't control the map like Tick can, and Grom can easily get overwhelmed by assassins still. So I think it's going to be A tier. Next up, we've got Bonnie. And Bonnie, I actually don't know, because B I do know, but Bonnie has 1 ammo on the cannon form, and I don't know if she can burst down like B can. If she can, it's good, because she does deal she deals okay damage, and her shots aren't super hard to hit. She did get a projectile speed nerf a while ago, and then she can jump and pretty much shred anything with her normal form, not her cannon form. But I just think that it just isn't that strong compared to B. But still, she's going to be very bursty, so I'm going to put her in the A tier. She has range. Next up, we have Gale, and Gale with the freezing snow star power. How the hell? Like, if he bursts onto you, you're dead. Everybody knows in the quickfire modifier, if Gale locks onto you with the freezing snow star power, you're screwed. But now he doesn't have to worry about it. He can infinitely spam. Even though he has a fast reload speed it doesn't matter. If he bursts you with the freezing snow star power, say your prayers. You're dead. You can't do anything. You have to burst down Gale. And Gale has insane burst. So, S tier. Gale is pretty much quickfire, but better. Next up, we've got Colette. And Colette, imagine with the Gotcha Gadget. That's just insane healing. She has decent range, and her shots are so easy to hit. But the problem is, sharpshooters can still outrange her, which is the only drawback, really, to Colette. But either way, just imagine the amount of supers and kills she can confirm. Against tanks, tanks are screwed, but tanks are going to be bad in this. So, for that, she gets downgraded. But I still think it's A tier either way. Next up, we've got Belle. And Belle is another sharpshooter. She already has a pretty decent reload speed. She does lack the damage, and she also doesn't have that great of a burst damage. But either way, sharpshooters benefit the most from this. So, for me, she still has to be at least A tier. Next up, we have Ash. Ash is already a forgotten brawler as is, and yeah, nothing's really going to change. Ash already has a quick reload speed. He has the star power that helps him as well, but Is Rats good? Like, nah, I don't know. Ash already sucks as is, so if anything, he's just gonna get F tier. Next up, you've got Lola, and Lola is a brawler similar to Colt in a way, where she has good burst damage, deals decent damage, and has a decent reload speed. Not slow by any means, but it's not fast. So, another brawler that I would definitely have to put in the A tier. Next up, we've got Sam, and Sam is, he's a tank, he's an assassin, but he already has a decent reload speed. Now, when he has his Knuckle Busters, his reload speed is a little bit slower, but he just doesn't have the burst, really. Like, the way you play Sam is you just have his super. So, anything, I just don't... Sam really isn't going to change, in my opinion, so I'm going to put him in the F tier. Next up, we've got... What the hell? Mandy. I blanked for a second. We have Mandy, and Mandy has a decent reload speed. It's not really that slow, but just to imagine the amount of attacks she can spew out. The problem is she doesn't have that great of burst damage either. It's quite slow in between attacks. So, but nonetheless, she is a sharpshooter, and sharpshooters definitely are going to be in the top of the meta with this. So I'm putting her in the A tier as well. Next up, we have Maisie. Maisie is considered a sharpshooter, but I don't really consider that. Her shots are so hard to hit at max range. Now, she has decent burst damage, so eventually she's going to hit some shots. It's just that she needs to hit the shots. And she's a tank counter, so she might be better with... Because she does have a pretty slower reload speed, and she also has a good gadget super combination. But I don't think it's going to change her like drastically compared to the A tier brawlers, but I could definitely see her being B tier. Next up, we have Hank. He already has infinite ammo. Nothing's going to change. So, F tier. Next up, we have Pearl. I think Pearl has a decent... I don't really remember. Pearl has a decent reload speed as is, and she deals decent damage. So, like, she's a brawler similar to Lola in a way, where she just... The problem is she's really never going to be able to heat up, which that's definitely a drawback for Pearl. So, if anything, I feel like that would kind of make her worse, because the way you kind of play Pearl is you kind of wait for her heat to build up, and then you burst down on the enemies. But Pearl, you don't really want to do that if you have infinite ammo. You literally just want to spam. So I feel like this kind of contradicts Pearl in a way. And for that reason alone, I'm going to put her in the C tier, even though she has decent range. Next up, you've got Larry and Laurie. The biggest weakness with Larry and Laurie definitely is their reload speed is slow as hell. But if you have infinite ammo, oh boy, you're in for a shit show. And yes, holy cow, Larry and Laurie are already one of the best brawlers in the game. They could literally, they have no counters, like legitimately. They have the gadget that switches their placements. Laurie will be on the battlefield pretty much the whole game. You're not stopping them. They're so broken if they have infinite ammo. So I'm hoping Supercell doesn't do it. Next up, we have Angelo. He suffers the same problem as Hank. He already has infinite ammo, so another F-tier brawler. Next up, we have Barry. Oh, man, I forgot about Barry. Barry's going to be so broken, too, because Barry already has so much map control, and the biggest drawback to Barry is definitely assassins, but it also, his reload speed is really slow. He does have the star power that helps, but you don't need it. You can use the other star power and pretty much control the map the whole game and heal his teammates. How are you going to stop that? You literally can't. Next up, we have Mortis. Here we go. Another S tier. Why? Mortis has a very slow reload speed as is. He could dash around the map pretty much the whole game, and he's going to be pretty much the only counter to throwers, besides Miko, which we will get to. Otherwise, yeah, you're really... Because you need mobility, and Mortis will be able to dash. He's going to be able to make the plays in Brawl Ball. Mortis will be S tier if if infinite ammo exists. Next up, you have Tara. Tara has a slow reload speed. And she doesn't have that crazy range, but she will definitely shred through tanks in the mid-range brawlers. But the long-range brawlers, she's really never going to get to. And she has decent burst damage as well. So I could see Tara being meta, but it's just the range. So I don't think she's going to be that crazy. But B tier, I think, is a good spot. Next up, you've got Gene. Everybody knows that Gene was so insane in the quickfire modifier because his attacks spread. So imagine the burst damage with chip damage. So Gene's going to be pretty much uncounterable. The only way you're going to be able to counter Gene is with a thrower. And So, but obviously, gotta be careful because on the open maps, even if Gene gets a super, he can pull the thrower through, and once he does, the thrower is not going to stand no chance. So, Gene, I think will be S tier. So next up we have Max, and Max really won't change that much. She's a mid-range brawler, good super, but she already has pretty much infinite ammo. She has 4 ammo slots and already a very fast reload speed. So I don't think Max is going to change that much, but just it'll be a little slight difference. So. But I'm going to put her in the D tier. I don't think much is going to change. Next up, we have Mr. P. Mr. P he has a decent reload speed. It's not really that slow, but it's not fast. He will have a decent amount of supers, but I just don't think it's really going to help him because he could still get countered by aggression. He's a decent counter to throwers in a way, but not really because throwers can counter him and his porters. So honestly, Mr. P will barely change, kind of like Max. Next up, we have Sprout, and Sprout has an okay reload speed, but Sprout also suffers the same issue as Grom, is that his attacks Sprout does not have a gender, its attacks are constant, and you really can't counter aggression because they're just going to run all over Sprout. Now, in the right situation, Sprout is going to destroy everything, but that one aggression brawler is going to ruin him. So, but it's still going to be, Sprout still for me definitely has to be at least in the A tier. Next up we got Byron, and Byron is a brawler with long range, and he already has a pretty fast reload speed though for a sharpshooter, and can put out damage, but sharpshooters benefit the most from this, so he's not going to like get so much worse, but he doesn't have that much of he has a pretty decent delay between his attacks. So honestly, I'm going to put Byron in the B tier. I don't think he's gonna change, obviously, but it's not gonna be like that significant compared to the A tier brawlers. Next up, you've got Squeak, and Squeak has a pretty slow reload speed. Just imagine the map control with Squeak, because Squeak can still get countered by aggression, but if you're able to spam his attacks, at least you will trade with the assassin most of the time. And Squeak can be a decent counter to longer range brawlers because he has the residue gadget that can block off a choke point, and the map control to force the enemies away from a specific area. So honestly, I think Squeak is going to be S tier. Might surprise you because he has a slow reload speed, but that map control is going to be crazy. Next up, we've got Lou, and Lou already has a pretty quick reload speed. His shots are pretty much impossible to hit at long range because it's just really hard. He's a tank counter, not a long range counter. So if anything, I don't think Lou's really going to change that much. So I'll put him in the C tier though because he does have decent burst potential, but it's not anything crazy. Next up, we have Colonel Ruffs, and Ruffs has a pretty but when he first came out, he had like no delay. He could spam his attacks, but he has a decent delay. He doesn't have that crazy of range, but at least he can bounce his shots, and he doesn't really counter anybody. He's more of a support brawler. He gets countered by pretty much any aggression or thrower. So I think that's going to be the biggest downfall. He does have his first star power to help, but I don't think it's going to be that crazy. So I'll put him in the B tier. Next up, we got Buzz. And Buzz, I don't think is going to change that much because Buzz already has a very fast reload speed and he has very short range. So I really don't think Buzz is going to change at all. So I'm going to put him in the F tier. I don't think Buzz is going to change pretty much at all. Next up, we've got Fang. And Fang also has a pretty quick reload speed. He doesn't have that crazy amount of burst. So kind of suffers the same problem as Buzz, where Fang really won't change that much. So I'm going to put Fang in the F tier. I don't think anything's really going to change. Next up, we've got Eve. And Eve is got a slower-ish reload speed. It's like her reload speed is like average, I would say. And she does have range. She's a long-range brawler. Her shots are pretty challenging to hit, but I just imagine the amount of burst. She doesn't have that crazy amount of burst, but I just imagine the amount of hatchlings she can have, especially if she uses her second star power with the gadget and her super with the quadruplets mythic gear. It's going to be a lot of chaos, but I don't think it's going to be completely game-breaking, though. I will put her in the A tier, though, because I do see potential. Next up, we've got Janet. And Janet has a normal reload speed. She has a decent main attack, and she can burst down tanks. The problem is she has to charge her attack up at max range. So if anything, it's not going to do that much. Now, she will be able to counter aggression a little bit better, but that's she already lacks the damage as is. So if anything, it's not going to really change Janet that much. I will put her in the C tier, but it's really not going to do much. Next up, we got Otis. And Otis, I feel like, could be an underrated one, because Otis has a decent reload speed already as is, but he also has his super, and then if he's out of ammo, he's kind of screwed, because he can easily be overwhelmed if he doesn't have a super, but you got infinite ammo, which means you're going to have super a lot more often. Now, it's going to be hard to hit that super on long range, because Otis, again, another tank counter, not really a long range brawler counter. So, if anything, I don't think Otis is going to change that much, so I'm going to put him in the C tier. Next up, we've got Buster. And Buster he is a tank. He has a little bit of a slower reload speed. But he also has his gadget, which will pull in the enemies. And then he can just burst them down with non-stop attacks that deal decent damage. So I think Buster's a pretty decent one here. He's going to be probably the best tank that benefits from this trait. So I'm going to put him in the B tier. Next up, we've got Gray. And Gray has, I think, a normal reload speed as well. If anything, it might be a little bit fast. The problem, though, is Gray doesn't have good burst, and his attacks are so challenging to hit, but eventually you'll get super. But the way you play Gray is you play him kind of passive, and then you eventually go in with your super. So, like, it'll help him, but not really that much. Next up, we got RT, and RT has a pretty slow burst. Like, he has a super that he can kind of spam, but that was nerfed as well. So, I don't think much is going to change with RT either. He is a long-range brawler, though, and can counter pretty much anything. So, I'll also put him in the B tier. Next up, we've got Willow. And Willow is a thrower. She's kind of a bad thrower in a way, but she at least has similar mechanics to Marley, and pretty much anything aggressive will pretty much never be able to approach her, because she's probably going to have super available all the time. Just the thing is, though, with Willow, is she, in a thrower versus thrower situation, most of the time will lose, because her attacks are slower, and she also doesn't deal, well, she deals decent damage, so I guess she's not going to struggle that badly, but I just imagine Larry and Laurie, Barley, Tick, all those throwers in the S tier, Barry, they're all going to just beat Willow. So Willow, though, definitely is going to be in the A tier, though, because throwers, like I said, are going to benefit. Next up, we got Doug. Yeah, I'm sorry, Doug, you're going in the F tier. We don't need to talk about you. You're a bad brawler as is already, and you're a support brawler who will never get their super. So, yeah, you're cooked. Next up, we got Chuck. And Chuck has a pretty slow reload speed, but the way you play Chuck is you use him in Heist with his super. But this is a main attack video, and Chuck's main attack sucks. There's no other way to put it. And it doesn't have that great range. It's super easy to avoid, so it'll help him a little bit, but not really. I'm putting D tier. Charlie has the same problem as Carl, where she only has one attack, so it physically doesn't change her at all. Then there was Miko. Miko has the slowest reload speed in the game. But with this, oh, brother, you better believe Miko is going to be S tier. He, I think, will be the best brawler if infinite ammo, because he not only has the slowest reload speed in the game, but he also is in the air with his main attack. He's going to be probably, besides Mortis, he's going to be the only counter to throwers, because throwers are going to overwhelm. The only way you're going to be able to counter Miko is by simply insta-killing him when he lands on the ground. But that's very, very tricky to do, because good Miko players know how to play Miko and can constantly cycle through supers. So I just think it's going to be impossible to freaking kill Miko, because he's just going to be jumping all over the map. Even in Heist, he has the star power that helps him. He's going to be very, very powerful. Next up, we got Melody. And Melody, I don't think Melody is really going to change that much, because she relies on her notes. Her main attack already doesn't deal that much damage. She does have good burst, but she really, she'll have notes pretty much the whole game. But I feel like the way you play Melody right now is she already has notes pretty much the whole time. So I don't think this is going to change really at all. So I'm going to put Melody in the D tier. Next up, we've got Lily, and Lily has extreme burst, as you can tell already. Ever since she got her second ammo bar, you can spam both of her attacks. If you get in range of a Lily, you're just gonna die. But the biggest problem is Lily has no range. She does have the Vanish gadget, which legitimately is the only reason that gives her viability. But once she runs out of those gadgets, it's going to be very hard to overwhelm her. Now, she has her super, but I don't know. I'm putting her in the A tier, though, at least. She could be S tier, you could argue. I wouldn't be mad if you said S tier, because her burst damage is extreme. Like, it's unbelievable how fast she can burst down her shots. Next up, we got Clancy. And Clancy has decent burst, but Clancy's a tank counter and kind of lacks the range. Now, if Clancy gets to stage 3, oh boy, that could be a problem. But Clancy really like relies on his super, not so much his main attack. So I don't think Clancy would change that much. So for me, I'm going to put him in the C tier. Next up, we've got Spike, and Spike has a slow reload speed. So I just imagine the amount of burst that Spike can throw out there. But I don't know. Spike's more of a tank counter, not really a long-range counter. Now, he does have Curveball, which will help him a bit. So, I think Spike could benefit a little bit from this. Not crazy. So, I'll put him in the B tier. Next up, we got Crow. And Crow has a quick reload speed, but the amount of poison, you're never going to be able to heal up. So, Crow does lack the range, but he'll get super more often and be able to play more aggressive and get more hypercharges. So, I think Crow could be an underrated one. He just has to chip those brawlers. He has to chip those long-range brawlers. On a bushy map, I think he'll be pretty good, though. So I'll put Crow in the B tier. Next up, we got Leon. And Leon has insane burst damage. And eventually, he's going to get super and delete legitimately everybody. So he's going to get hypercharge, delete more people. He's one of the best brawlers in Quickfire. There should be no reason he's not one of the best brawlers here. Now, I think the only problem is Leon can get countered by the longer range brawlers a little bit too easy until he gets his super, and then he can shred. Just getting that first super is going to be the biggest challenge, though. But once he gets it, I think he'll be good. But I don't think he's S tier. I'm not going to lie. So I'm going to put him in the A tier, though. But you could say S tier. I really wouldn't be upset at you. Next up, you've got Sandy. And Sandy has pretty quick burst fire. He lacks the range, but the way you play Sandy is once you get a super down, you're very, very hard to find. But I don't think Sandy would be that crazy. He does have his gadget, which will stun the enemies, allowing you to get more damage. But it's just, you have to get in range. And it's too hard to do that. So for me, B tier. Next up, we've got Amber. And Amber, I can only imagine. Amber is just going to be holding down the auto-aim button, shredding everybody to pieces, and just spamming. Like, she will have fire all over the ground. There's no delay between her attacks. It's just the whole game. If she locks onto you, you're dead. End of story. The biggest problem is getting in range. Once again, she has decent range. So, honestly, I think Amber could be very broken. I don't think she's S tier, but definitely A tier for me. Next up, we got Meg. And Meg has a pretty decent reload speed, especially in her mech form. The thing is, Meg has to get in range before her mech gets taken out, and it's super easy to farm off of Meg, especially after her rework. You have to play a little bit more aggressive to get close to her, but I still think she's going to be A tier because she can just constantly spam. Next up, we've got Surge, and Surge, especially, you guys know how broken Surge's gadget is. Power Shield. Like, you get those 2 extra ammo back, you're bursting down tanks. The problem with Surge is, he again is a tank counter, not a long-range brawler counter. But, once he gets to stage 3, he has the range, and once he gets to stage 4, he's gonna cook, because he's just gonna be able to spread his attacks, and he has his hypercharge. So, I could see Surge being very powerful. It's just, getting that first stage is gonna be a humongous problem because Surge has no tanks to farm off in this mode. So I'm putting him in the B tier though. Next up, you got Chester. And Chester has really good burst damage. And he can just constantly spam out 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just constant damage, constant damage. Now, he has decent range too, and his supers are, they're alright. But he's more of a tank counter. So, and he has to be played on a bushy map. So, I could see Chester, though, being very strong. So, I'm going to put him in the B tier, though. I think that's the safest spot. Next up, we got Cordelius. And Cordelius has already a quick reload speed. And once he puts somebody in the Shadow Realm, his reload speed's even faster. So I don't really think Cordelius is really going to change really at all. So I would put him in the C tier. Next up, we've got Kit. Kit has a very fast reload speed. His supercharges over time. Now, it's good for scratching more often, but if you really think about it logically, maybe in thrower form, it'll be a little bit better, but I don't know. I don't see how Kit's really going to change that much. I can't imagine, though, once you're riding on a teammate, the amount of bombs you can throw, but I feel like Kit's bombs are a little bit challenging to hit, and it just depends on the teammate. So I don't think Kit's really going to change that much. So C tier. Next up, we got Draco. And Draco in Dragon form is going to be insane because the amount of he can just constantly burst down, and once he runs out of ammo, the problem is though if Draco gets another super, he does get ammo back, and I think it's just a little bit. I don't really think it's going to change Draco too much, so I'm actually just going to put him in the B tier, like one tier down from Amber. Next up we have Mo, and Mo has a decent reload speed, but the amount of damage potential on Mo is already insane, but just even more damage. Like, Mo's attacks are very hard to predict, so it's just going to be constant damage, really. And I just think it could be overwhelming, so I'm going to put him in the A tier. And lastly, we have Kenji. Now, Kenji has a pretty quick reload speed as is, but Kenji is very similar to Mortis, and he can have mobility, constantly get damage out, constantly heal from his attack. I have to put him S tier. He's already an S tier brawler, but with infinite ammo, like, I can't downgrade him because he's already insanely broken with the amount of healing he can do. He's going to be getting so many supers. Like, how are you going to kill him? You can't. But yep, that is going to be it for this video. I hope y'all enjoyed. Let me know in the comments, agree, disagree, what I should change, what I was wrong. But I feel like this is a pretty good list. I'm not going to lie. But that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. And I will see you in the next one.